Hello, my darlings. Welcome back. I'm Daniel.
And I'm Garet, and we're your hosts of Modern Gaze. On today's episode, we're thrilled to be joined by Dan Harry, one of the stars of I Kissed a Boy. Beyond reality TV, Dan is making waves in sexual health advocacy, particularly with his participation in an HIV vaccine trial and his efforts to raise awareness around PrEP. He also hosts the BBC documentary HIV, PrEP, and Me, where he explores the ongoing challenges and advances in HIV prevention. We'll dive into his work and the importance of preventative sexual health education. Let's get into it.
Us gays, we just know how to do stuff.
Well, what about modern gays?
That's easy. Modern gays do everything.
So, Dan, thank you so much for joining us on Modern Gaze.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm very excited to have a chat with you.
We're very excited to have you on the show. For those who may not know you, we've recently been binging I Kissed a Boy, which is hosted by the gorgeous Danny Minogue. Give our listeners a little bit more about what the show is about and your personal journey on the show.
I have to say, it's so funny because I filmed that show 2 years ago, right? That was a holiday I went on 2 years ago, which now still is like haunting me, which is so funny. But basically, I Kissed a Boy was a reality TV show, the first UK gay dating show for the BBC in the UK. And then basically since it came out in the UK, it started to roll out in other countries. So every couple of months, like, I'll get a message from someone in Amsterdam and they're like, oh my God, I saw the show and I loved it. And I'm like, oh my God, it's just staying with me. But essentially, the premise is a bunch of gay guys at Masseria, what they call it, like a big villa in Italy, sort of exploring and navigating love and relationships with each other. And then Danny Minogue's there to just make it fun and camp. So that's I Kissed a Boy.
Yeah. You obviously came in a little bit later into the show and we can talk about that. But when the boys are first matched and paired, they essentially don't know who they're paired with. They walk up to this stranger and kiss each other. And then some had connections, some didn't. I think that was really interesting to watch. I think you walked in with so much confidence and you walked in with so much presence into the show.
When I first agreed to do the show, it was all on the basis that I was going to be going in that first starting lineup.
Right.
And then lots of things happened at the very last minute where things changed. I was a bit like, I don't really know how to feel about this because I just felt less confident about going in later. But in the end, I think actually it worked out quite well for me because I was able to go in and be a bit of like a free agent and just explore lots of different connections from the get-go. Whereas I think some of the other boys felt quite tied to their initial matches. So I remember being so scared, so scared, because also like, it's not just the actual concept of like going in and potentially meeting someone and whatever, like it's the TV of it all. It's the fact that like you're pausing for cameras to be changed.
The whole production,
Danny's getting her lines fed to her, so you're standing there in silence watching that happen. All the boys knew each other and they would all they already knew how the house worked and where the cameras were and like all those things. I already felt a bit nervous about that, but I think the way I feel these things is like I just go in like guns blazing, and that's what I did.
What it felt like as a viewer was that you were like really a breath of fresh air because obviously these guys have connected. They had to form a bond really quickly, and then they had a sense of loyalty to each other. But then there's obviously this interest that's happening as more and more boys are showing up in the house. And they get to know each other more and more and realize, oh, maybe we're not as compatible as we thought we were. And things start to open up a bit. All the guys on the show seem pretty cool, but you really were just direct. Like you were really calm energy. You had really upfront, like honest communication. And throughout the show, you were the first one to really speak up when you didn't feel like something was right or someone said something in a way that they shouldn't have said, or you were really transparent with your thoughts. And that was really something that I felt like the show needed and why we wanted to talk to you, because in such a complex dynamic where you're in a house with a bunch of boys where you're all kind of dating each other and trying to find the one and really also form friendships and do a little bit of a self-discovery. You seem to be like a really great anchor. Did it feel like that at all? Or did you feel just really lost in it as well as you were going through what felt like a competition?
Well, thank you for saying that. Like, that makes me feel really good, because you really don't know how you're coming across, and you don't actually really know how people are perceiving you. Like, I was just trying to be very candid. Like, I was trying to do two things. I was trying to be myself, but I was also trying to keep the story going, and people need to know what's in my head. Otherwise it doesn't make sense. And I was just like vocalizing where I stood and how I felt and what was on my mind. I wanted my opinion and my point of view to be really clear. So that's why I would sort of try to do that throughout the process, but also just be very honest and true to myself and where I stood, because people always like will say to you like, oh, like how fake is reality TV? And it's like, for me, like, I was extremely real the whole time. Like, I was exactly who I am, like maybe just trying to be like the best version of myself. And I remember thinking like, oh my, when I walked in and everyone was sort of going through the emotions of it, I remember thinking, this is fucking weird. Like, this is strange. Like, what? The way people were speaking to each other, I was like, this doesn't feel natural or normal.
Right.
But then you start to realize that this is just because they're all conditioned now to how the TV show has been filmed. And I think I started to pick up on that quite quickly, but still very much stayed true to myself, because a few people tried to start beef with me.
Yes.
And I remember like looking at them like,
what are you doing?
What are you, like, what, like, what's that? And actually, like, a lot of those scenes didn't even make it because they didn't get the response from me that they probably thought they were going to get.
And it's, I bet, really hard to go on a dating show where you're trying to authentically find someone to love and love you, and also be vulnerable. It's like a vulnerability test where how real can I be with a camera shoved in my face?
That was the absolute hardest part for me, was the vulnerability, because I'm such a, like, I'm like a PR person. Like, I present a version of myself that I want people to see, right? But like, and I'm such a control freak in that aspect. But I think like when you're in that environment, you're forced into being vulnerable. And actually, like, my connection with Ollie was the most vulnerable that I've probably ever been in my life, in the sense like I was very open and honest about my feelings with him during that experience, knowing that it was all being filmed, which is not something that I would usually ever do.
Yeah. The show is obviously a dating show, right? But there would be many similarities with real life dating or trying to build connections with people on the show as well as real life.
Do you know what it is? I think that environment like is created, like the world of that, like being in the Masseria with Danny Minogue and everything, like it's all tailored to make you feel emotion and make you feel that you're falling in love.
Of course.
But it sometimes then is hard to sort of replicate that outside.
Yeah. It's like a pressure cooker in the sense like you also have a little bit of a pressure to feel like you have to make a connection or you have to find love. And, you know, it's similar when we're dating out in the real world where you might have felt lonely or you're looking to share your life with someone, or you're seeing your friends together and you really want a boyfriend too. And then you put a lot of pressure on yourself, like trying to make a relationship work when maybe it's not the right, you know, match for you. But in that scenario, you have nowhere to go. What about intimacy? When you're forced in this show to instantly kiss, at least when you're one of the original arriving cast members, and then there's also like a little bit of pressure to continue your relationship every time because you have to seal it with a kiss. And that's the whole premise. What about more than kissing?
Because you're all staying in a room together.
There's no privacy really. Were people hooking up?
What do you think?
100%. Obviously.
We said they're definitely all having a massive orgy.
That was maybe your fantasy.
That was what we said, Henny.
What kind of show is it?
So funny because that question always comes up. People are like, oh my God, I bet you were all like having sex in there, whatever. I bet it was so crazy. Let me tell you, no one did anything whatsoever.
You're
kidding.
One did,
and also, no one even came close to it. Basically, there was a night where they had something called the man cave, and it was like a separate bedroom that basically the boys could vote for a certain couple to go into. And I remember this so vividly, where basically there was a night where some members of production were gunning for Ollie and I to be voted to go into the man cave, and we were. Basically, certain things were like set up to ensure that me and Ollie ended up going into the man cave, and I know that they wanted some sort of steamy scene from us, which we didn't give them, obviously. Like, we obviously had fun with it and were like very playful and very like intimate with each other generally, but not from a sexual level. Like, we did the whole shower thing and everything. I remember actually thinking about whenever we were chatting about doing the funny little shower moment, it was my way of thinking, I know I'm not going to have sex on TV, but I know they're going to want something like that. So to me, that was like a good in-between of something fun and cheeky that we can do,
right,
which still feels like not going too crazy.
With a show like this, and obviously like the sexual tension, and there's like a lot of pressure, and like you realize that you're filming a show and it's entertainment, but it's also your life, because this has been a great springboard for getting more people to know what you do on the side, outside of this show. And you're actually creating a platform of advocacy to help educate more and more people, not only the LGBTQ plus community, but everyone around their sexual and mental health. Tell us a little bit about your advocacy work and contributions within the community, specifically around HIV, PrEP,
safe sex,
and sexual freedom to feel good about yourself.
I always wanted to do something like way more meaningful and way more purpose-led and like purpose-driven, particularly for my own community, right? I Kissed the Boy was a completely random thing. I never intended to go into a reality show. Like, they approached me on Instagram and asked me to do it. And the reason why I did it was because they said it was going to be this like iconic moment in TV history because it was the first ever one in the UK. That was the real reason why, because I felt like it was going to be something quite meaningful, not because I thought like I want to be on a reality show. Like, that was the reason. My bigger purpose and the thing I care about way more is advocacy work that I do within the community. For example, I was a volunteer for a HIV vaccine trial. So for over a year of my life, I was literally in and out of hospital appointments like every other week, being given injections, and they're taking lots of my blood and basically doing different tests on me. I was essentially a guinea pig for a potential vaccine, which, if it worked, could be given to people and prevent them from ever contracting HIV, which is like a huge, crazy thing in science and sexual health.
Absolutely.
If that could happen. So that was like a really big moment, and I just volunteered for that.
Wow.
I just started basically I applied to take part. It was only 5 other people who were on that trial with me being given that vaccine. So that sort of kick-started my sexual health work. And then from there, I started working with an amazing charity in the UK called Terence Higgins Trust, which is a HIV charity here, doing lots of fundraising and advocacy work for them. And then that's how my documentary came about. So HIV, PrEP and Me was the documentary that I presented for BBC Three. Which, to do that, I just couldn't believe that I had the opportunity to create a platform like that, which basically was all about HIV prevention and PrEP, which I'd imagine your listeners will know what PrEP is. But essentially like teaching people about PrEP. And I had so many amazing conversations with people who've never heard what PrEP is, but now all of a sudden do know what PrEP is and are on PrEP. And it was an amazing thing to be a part of.
You talk to people who never imagined that they would need to consider PrEP or consider an ongoing
thinking about it,
preventative treatment for exposure to HIV. But it is something that everyone should really consider and absolutely require to protect themselves when they're letting their freak flag fly. You should really take advantage of anything that you can, especially when it's really about your own health and safety.
I felt already like I knew so much about HIV and I knew so much about sexual health from my own sort of research. I'm very much ingrained in my community. I've got friends who live with HIV. Like, it's something that like I'm very around, right? But probably the biggest learning moment for me from the documentary was meeting Ellie. So Ellie was the girl, she's 27, she's a straight girl, and She tested positive for HIV when she was 21, and basically realised that it had been from her ex-boyfriend. And she obviously didn't in a million years, as a straight young girl at uni, think that HIV was something that was ever going to affect her. But her response to that positive status was literally like, I'm going to make this the most positive thing that can happen in my life. And she totally reclaimed it and is now like this amazing advocate for HIV and is out there speaking for the community in such an amazing way. And like, she's one of my friends now, and I just think she's amazing. Hearing her say like it was one of the best things that happened to her because it gave her so much like reclamation of her life. And I've never heard anyone say anything like that about HIV, and it sort of changed my perspective on it. And I think if you'd asked me like a couple of years ago, I would have said HIV would be something that I'd be really scared of. And obviously you don't want to test positive for HIV, but essentially HIV is much like other sexual STIs. If you're taking your medication correctly, then you become undetectable and you can't pass it on, and you live a completely happy, normal life.
When I was obviously having sexual partners as a young adolescent at 18, 19, I never got taught, obviously, by my straight parents about HIV prevention or to get tested or even STIs or STDs. Like, you don't get taught these things as a gay male or as a queer male. And I always went into every sexual experience, to be completely honest, thinking, did I just get HIV or did I get an STD? Because there wasn't that awareness that we have today. Back then, I felt like when I was obviously coming out and going through my life. And I think many people can relate to that. So I think the work that you're doing is very empowering to spread that awareness and ensure that people are aware of it to get that treatment or to go and get tested or to just go on PrEP and, like you said, feel safe, feel secure, and have sex with confidence.
There's way more access to technology and films and YouTube documentaries, our shows like Netflix and like there's ways to consume this information way more than it used to be for us growing up as kids. And we officially, as a global society, have the 7th person that has been classified as cured from HIV. In our lifetimes, we will have a cure. It's no longer a death sentence that it was for so many people in our past. And with your work and that education, it's really about the stigma. And I feel like the work now needs to be done on the communication side and on the relationship connection side. Like, the science is there. We're really supported. PrEP works. We're working towards a cure. Like, you participated in a clinical trial. Like, we're getting there. We are so close. And with the conversations and this ability to remove the taboo is so important. Do you feel like your community in the UK and your experience either on the show or with some of your friends, like you said, like you're not fearful of it anymore, but is there still any feeling of judgment or feeling of fear? What is it like in your community when hearing that someone might have HIV or someone might be undetectable?
Such an interesting question for me, because I speak so openly and so publicly about the topic of HIV. People just assume that I am HIV positive, right? That's just an assumption people make.
Right.
I'm not, right? But I don't care if that's what people think, but that is very much something that I face all the time. So I completely agree. The stigma is the real disease. Like, you can live happily and normally with HIV, but it's a stigma that will stay with you and have that really negative impact on your life. And I guess the reason why I speak about it as someone who's not living with HIV is because I want to just break that stigma. So that's sort of like how I approach it. And then in terms of among my friends and peers in my community, I try to be around people who have similar views, and everyone, like my friends do. But I know that's not the case universally. Like, even some of my friends who are living with HIV, like, they tell me like the messages on Grindr, for example, are absolutely like vile stuff that they get. And that's obviously really horrible to hear. But I think that's why you've just got to go out there and just keep fighting the stigma, because like you said, the science is there. we have a handle on this. And there's a whole thing of a cure, but the other thing is just ending transmission. So the cure benefits certain communities, but among gay men, ending transmissions would be the most accessible way to do it. And that is within our grasp.
Really great point is the concept of a cure compared to the ending of transmission. PrEP is supported by many governments, at least here in Australia and also in the UK and globally. It's a drug that most healthcare providers will cover the cost of or make more accessible. And the idea of a cure is really inaccessible and might be reserved for communities of specific privileges. So with a drug that is so widely produced and supported and clinically tested and that works, ending transmission, I think, is really the number one goal. Mm-hmm. And that's where our focus should really be. Because we should be really confident in who we are and what we do and how we live our lives. And no matter your sexual
and enjoy the experience.
Yeah. When you're dating, as well as your experience on the show, which also talks about authenticity and vulnerability and putting yourself out there and
wearing your heart on your sleeve.
How does that affect your dating life today? What are your experiences now that you have a much bigger impact in the community?
I find that a lot of guys who I would typically like are either don't think it's cool or don't want to admit that they think it's cool. Dating has sort of been weird for me since. It's not been like, oh my God, I get whoever I want. That's not definitely been the case at all.
I've also seen on Instagram so many single gay queer men saying on those reels that are just quick with a caption on the top of them. It's dating today is I like you, but I don't want to commit to you. So it's people are, like you said, they're trying to act cool or not, act like they're not into it. And I don't know who you are. And it just seems wild to me that dating has become so difficult.
Well, do you know what? I also think that I am part of the problem. I'm trying to sort of overcome my own demons with dating and relationships. And acknowledge that there's toxic aspects of my personality when it comes to dating as well. I can definitely be the type who's a bit, not all the time, but in certain aspects, if it doesn't work in the first half an hour, then I'm nah, it's not going to work.
You're looking for the spark. You want that instant spark.
You want a quick gratification.
Yeah, and I think I may be quite selfish when it comes to dating as well. I'm well, if you're not ticking every box, then it's just not happening. So I think I'm personally trying to overcome a lot of those demons, and I think that's probably what the challenge is with dating in general is a lot of sort of gay men like myself living in a city, sort of living a bit of a Peter Pan life. The grass is always greener. It can be hard. I haven't cracked it yet. So
well, it's actually good.
I'm working on it.
It's good that, that I think for our listeners to hear that you have this really public platform. You went on this really great vulnerable show that does make a really important impact within media for representation, as well as released a documentary around helping people feel more informed and confident around their sexual health. And you are still struggling to navigate life as you figure it out, because
we're all figuring it out.
We're all on our own journey. And it's we can have aspects of our lives that are really, really just out there. And the facade is really great because the foundation's good. But we're still trying to figure out how do we make additions and how do we better ourselves. And I think that's a really great thing to remember. Not every single aspect of your life has to be figured out. It's just that you need to get your value from different aspects of your life. And I think that's what's hard about dating. It's when you're really only focused about dating and you have your blinders on and you're really desperately looking there and you're not getting the joy and fulfillment and you haven't invested in other aspects or areas of your life, whether it be your advocacy work, your friends, your family, your work, hobbies, whatever you love to do.
For our listeners out there who are in the dating pool, spread some words of wisdom to ensure that they continue to build their vibrant life and be authentic to themselves.
A very wise person once said to me that whatever you think your weakness is, actually could be your superpower. And that's something that I have taken with me throughout my life. Because I remember I was in a session at work one time, and basically people had to write down what they thought my weakness was, right? And all these people, like maybe like 25, 30 people, all wrote sassy. They thought I was too sassy, right? And I remember being like, what the hell? But then someone said to me, actually, that's not your weakness. That's your superpower. And I always remember thinking, well, do you know what? I'm going to own that. So whatever you think is your weakness in life, if you start to think about it like your superpower, maybe that will give you a new perspective on things. And when it comes to dating and everything, like I said, I am certainly still trying to figure it out. I'm just going around kissing lots of frogs in London until I found a prince. But in the meantime, just go and have fun. Like, who cares? I try not to deep things anymore. I'm like, nothing is that serious in life. Just go, have fun, be authentic, be you.
Thank you so much for joining us on the show today. It's been such a pleasure to have a chat with you.
You two are fucking legends. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Well, that wraps up our conversation with Dan. We love how he's using his platform to push for better sexual health education and to fight the stigma around HIV. We hope this episode leaves you feeling more informed and ready to have those important conversations yourself. Thanks for hanging out with us today. And remember, keep building the vibrant life you want by owning your authentic self. Hey everyone, it's Daniel and Garet from Modern Gaze. You know how we're all about owning your authentic self, right? Well, we found something that's totally in line with that. It's called Homes Decor, spelled with 2 M's. Yeah, like home, but make it French and fabulous. This place is not your average home decor store. It's a vibe.
Picture this, guys. Provocative pillows that start conversations, gay vintage art that's like a time machine to the past, and futuristic drag queen portraits that are just, iconic. It's all about expressing you.
And get this, they're offering free international shipping for orders over $200.
Save that money!
So you can be fabulous no matter where you are in the world.
Oh, and because we love you guys, use the code ModernGaze at checkout for a cheeky 10% off. It's like a high five from us to you.
So go ahead, make your space as vibrant as you are. Check out Homes, that's HOMMES, decor.com, and let your home tell your story.